So, New World came out about a week ago, and I've been playing it since launch, and I wanted to give some of my first impressions on it so far. And in case you didn't know, New World is a sandbox action PvP MMORPG. And so with it being a sandbox experience, after the tutorial segment, you could go out and do whatever you want. You go out into the world, gather materials, turn them into gear and items to help you progress. And if you don't like crafting and gathering, you could fight mobs and use the loot drop for them instead. This game has a faction system where you choose between one of 3 factions to join, and you could participate in large-scale faction wars. And if that isn't your style, you could participate in high-level dungeons. I think they're called expeditions. Or you can even just sell stuff and play the economy if you want to. The point is, the game is very open-ended as to what you want to do and what you can do. While playing, I spent a lot of my time just kind of doing as much as I can. I was playing the game really casually, and I think I only got to around like level 20 by the time of recording. I had a pretty mixed time with the game, honestly, but I do want to start off with what I liked about the game. The exploration, first off, is really fun. I've actually only walked around and explored like 2 areas or regions of the map, but it was pretty exciting seeing that little question mark on the map and discovering what landmark was there. The fast travel in the game, it's very limited too, and there aren't any mounts, so you are actually forced to run around the world and explore and move from place to place in general. I've actually enjoyed the system because there wasn't any long stretches of land with absolutely nothing to do, and there were different gathering materials to collect throughout the way from point A to B, as well as enemies to fight and animals to hunt. Something that did kind of annoy me though was the movement speed of your character. There is no sprint in this game. You can either walk or run, and your running speed isn't super fast. And so if I wanted to travel a long distance, I have to just kind of slog through that. Fast travel would be an option too, only if I discovered a fast travel point that's close to where I want to go, and if I have enough Azoth, which is a currency used for fast traveling and respeccing your character. It's also a crafting ingredient, but it's still kind of rare-ish to get. The gathering and crafting loop is pretty fun too, only when considering both systems as a whole though. If looked separately, the gathering is leagues better than the crafting. When gathering, you have to actually scout for the material that you want. Even though gathering modes are static in the world, meaning they don't move around, they aren't explicitly marked on the map until you're high enough level in that specific gathering skill, and even then, not everything shows up. The act of gathering the materials isn't much to write home about though, as it really is just walking up to the resource and pressing interact and waiting. But I still think the fun of it is locating resources and gaining XP for that gathering skill. I think my enjoyment of gathering kind of comes from my caveman brain telling me ooga booga get plant. But regardless, it's still fun to me. Crafting, in my opinion, isn't that engaging though. And the only reason why it's serviceable is because there's so much to craft and make. It's not an active process at all. All you do is click craft and watch a PNG pop up on screen. The only reason why I think people say the crafting is good is because you could get good items from it, and the act of exploring and gathering materials is so fun. That's why I said as a loop, crafting and gathering is great. But separated, crafting isn't that appealing. Actually, while I'm on the subject of crafting, I want to talk about some of the abhorrent user experience and choices that Amazon Game Studios made. First, you cannot open your inventory while in a crafting menu. This isn't really a big issue, mostly just slightly annoying. What's really annoying though is the absolutely abhorrent UI for the crafting skill page. While looking at the level of your crafting skills, you can click on them to see what you unlock at each level milestone in a list. The first thing that I noticed was that the list has no recipes, something that other games with a similar crafting gathering system has. The second thing, and this is the worst part, the list does not show if you're unlocking the normal crafting method or the material downgrade method of obtaining the item. So, there's 2 ways of crafting an item. Either take a low tier material and transform it into a higher tiered item, like take a tier 1 material that makes it into a tier 2 item. The other way of crafting an item is by taking something that's higher tiered and downgrading it into your desired object. For example, take a tier 3 metal like steel and downgrade into tier 2 iron. I have to say this again because I feel like I spent a little too long explaining this, but you cannot tell which version of crafting you're unlocking. This was one of the most annoying things that I've discovered, as I've spent a while confused as to why I couldn't craft steel despite the menu showing that I unlocked the crafting option. The reason I couldn't find it was because I had a crafting filter on and didn't realize I only unlocked the downgrade option. This is something that could be fixed with a patch, adding some text blurb or something, but please, that's one of the small quality of life fixes that I want to happen soon, like as soon as possible. The last thing I want to talk about for my first impressions though is the combat. And holy shit, the combat. The most basic way that I could put this is that the combat has a lot of jank. So you can equip up to 2 different weapons and use up to 3 different abilities per weapon. With that, you'd assume that the intent of fighting was to swap your weapons mid-fight to use your kit to the fullest. And well, you're right. My issue is the utter lack of fluidity with weapon switching. As far as I know, there's no option for players to switch weapons mid-combo, and after using abilities, there's always an awkward pause trying to swap after using an ability. Some weapons have it particularly egregiously compared to others though. Maybe I was spoiled from coming off a small binge of Black Desert, but in that game there were abilities that you could use to switch your other weapon quick, negating that stupidly long weapon swap animation. In fact, in BDO, you're encouraged to combo your secondary weapon's ability with your primary weapons. But that's too much on BDO. Back to New World. Whenever you attack, you're completely committed to it. This on its own is fine, but one of my issues is that when you attack with melee, you are completely stuck in place, and melee attacks have huge amounts of end lag. What's even worse than that though, is that there's no animation canceling on your attacks, and there's no way to use your roll to cancel an attack that you don't want to do. I've been in quite a few situations where I start to attack something, but the enemy moves out of the way before I finish the attack, so I just end up standing there eating the hit because I can't do anything. However, what I think is absolutely the worst offender of fighting in this game is that enemies lack hit stun. That means that even if you're attacking something, they can and will retaliate with their own attacks. Because of this, melee combat devolves into attack twice, roll away when enemy attacks, then attack again. The flaws in combat show the most when fighting more than one enemy at a time, or an enemy that can hit stun you easily, like the alligator enemies. I think the intention behind this may have been to prevent large group of people from stun locking enemies, but the problem with this thought too is that there are other games that have tackled this issue and they've done it leagues better, like Kurtzpell. Every enemy has a break meter that fills when a player attacks it, and when that bar fills up, the enemy gets stunned. Hell, even this very game solved the hit stun issue. Shielded enemies have a guard meter, and when you break that guard by dealing damage to them, they get staggered briefly. Basically, the same thing as the break meter in Kurtzpell. And oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention that you can't even punish enemy attacks due to their lack of hit stun. And this was something that was really upsetting to find out. I kept trying to attack enemies that were mid-attack animation, and I found myself getting punished as they don't stop their attacks when hit, and even worse, they fucking turn and are able to hit me. And this was something that I think doesn't need to be there at all, since enemies already have attacks that are telegraphed, by the way, that the player knows is going to destroy your guard, and I believe is still unstoppable anyways, so why not use those for retaliation attacks? Okay, I'm sorry, I went on a long tangent there about combat, and I said a lot of words for this review, but what does it actually mean? For my first impressions of the game, it has a very nice looking world with a fun gathering and crafting loop. Exploration was enjoyable as well for me, as I was always excited to go out and look for different landmarks. My biggest turnoff for New World, honestly, is the combat. It's janky and feels awful when fighting more than one thing at a time. That's something that I think needs to be addressed as soon as possible, as a game with a big emphasis on PvP that has bad combat, I don't think it would last long. I didn't do any PvP at all, and I don't want to due to the bad combat, so I really don't have any opinions on the PvP yet. I may try it in the future, but for right now, no. I really didn't want to spend a majority of the time talking negatively about the game, but the more I played, the more issues I had with the way fighting works, and that was my biggest issue with the game so far. Overall, I'm in a wait-and-see mindset about the game though. I want to reach max level, do some endgame content, and see what comes out in future updates before I pass my final judgment on it. But this is all my first impressions on the game. Did you agree with me? Did you disagree with me? How are you enjoying this game so far? Let me know in the comment section. And until next time, stay safe.